The nation voted this week, and it's clear that the Republicans got the upper hand. The GOP ripped U.S. Senate control from the Democrats and maintained their majority in the House. In Indiana, Republicans were able to retain their supermajority in the Indiana House and the Senate and picked up a few extra seats for good measure. Locally, 2 Democratic incumbents lost their re-election bid. Shelley Vandenberg lost to GOP candidate Julie Olthoff in the 19th district, and incumbent Mara Candelaria Reardon was defeated by Republican challenger Bill Fine in the 12th. There were a couple of bright spots for region Democrats, including the re-election of Democrat Pete Visclosky, who easily defeated Republican challenger Mark Leva in Indiana's 1st congressional district. Locally, about 27% of registered voters showed up at the polls. Northwest Indiana Democrats are choosing to focus on a few key victories and a turnout that wasn't too bad for a midterm election.
In county offices, our Democratic Party did well. We regained the assessor's office, county assessor's office. But again, the trend was the Republican sweeps, not only locally or statewide, but also nationally. So, but it's indicative of what happens in off-year elections.
Clearly, we were pleased with the victory, and you know, there's always a need to have more participation out there. But you know, from a comparative perspective, the turnout obviously increased somewhat, so that's always promising.
Lakeshore reporter Hillary Powell will have more about the ethics of Northwest Indiana elections a little later in our broadcast. Some popular technology helped voters navigate the polls this year. The Lake County Board of Elections and Voter Registration deployed iPads at Lake County polling places to help ease voters and poll workers through the election process. The iPads were used to sign in voters and track voter turnout throughout Lake County. Board Director Michelle Feynman says this is the first time the iPads were used in Lake County elections.
The nice thing about these new iPads is they don't necessarily have to have the Wi-Fi. Their entire precinct is loaded right on their iPad, as well as the entire county. And so we have seen a decrease in our office for people calling up wanting to know where to go vote at, because as they're entering the polling place, they're able to find out if they're at the wrong polling location.
Feynman says not everything ran smoothly. Power outages at Munster High School due to weekend storms forced 3 precincts to relocate voting to Munster's Wilbur Wright Middle School cafeteria. This week, the Indiana State Board of Education approved the A through F accountability grades for Hoosier schools. While many Northwest Indiana schools received an A grade, an alarming number of schools, most of which are located in Michigan City, Hammond, East Chicago, and especially Gary, are getting failing grades from the state. State Board of Education member Dr. Brad Oliver says that while the A through F system isn't perfect, its intentional focus on improving achievement has resulted in more schools with A's and B's and fewer schools with failing grades. The Department of Education will be reevaluating grades disputed by several Indiana schools, though none of those challenges have come from Northwest Indiana. Indiana School Superintendent Glenda Ritz says an agreement has been reached between the Gary School District and the Illinois Central School Bus Company. The dispute regarding payment of nearly $3 million to the busing company threatened to leave more than 4,000 Gary school students without transportation to and from school. A spokesperson for Illinois Central Busing says the problem is not an isolated one.
I think a lot of school districts are taking a hit right now. So I do not think it's unusual as far as any school district not making a payment. It's just unfortunate because in today's economy, the vendors still have the employees they have to pay. So it can make it problematic.
On September 24th, Illinois Central Busing notified Gary schools that unless a payment plan was established, bus service would stop on November 10th. The Gary Community School Corporation is facing a sizable budget deficit well in excess of $20 million. A pint-sized pest has inflicted some big damage in Northwest Indiana, but now there may be help for recovery. The Indiana Department of Natural Resources has been given a grant to help replant trees after many in the region were cut down because of infestation by the emerald ash borer insect. Communities affected can apply to receive a portion of the $100,000 given to the DNR by the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. The group also awarded a $35,000 grant to replant trees in the Dune State Park campground. That work should begin in spring of 2015. The work to make sure newly elected politicians play fair and honest is just getting underway. Hillary Powell has more on the big push to keep Northwest Indiana politics clean.
This week, elected officials have new lessons to learn on the job, and one Northwest Indiana group hopes a discussion of ethics is at the top of their to-do list. I found out why 150 candidates from across the region signed a pledge promising more honesty in their everyday affairs, and why experts say the pledge is important even without repercussions. Long after local government races are decided among parties red and blue, one local government agency will be worried about the gray.
So many issues that municipal employees face have a lot of gray areas. Ethics is a trained skill, a learned skill.
Officials with the Shared Ethics Advisory Commission, an interlocal agreement in the region, say they hope to clarify murky decisions of right and wrong for newly elected officials and those returning to office in the new year.
We're not asking them to personally commit to being ethical. We assume that. But what we are asking them to do is provide ethics training to all of the people that report to them. We are wanting them to commit to is whistleblower protection for employees who raise ethical issues.
Bellamy says the group uses case studies and training sessions to give local leaders practical tools to make good decisions. 150 candidates answered the commission's call to all individuals running in the midterms to promise to provide ethics training for staff, including 3rd District Lake County Councilman-elect Jamal Washington.
It's telling you, it's about what you do when people are not watching and what you're doing when they are. So shared ethics is saying, be on the straight and narrow even when you're not being watched. And that's all it's saying. So I have no problem with doing that whatsoever.
Bellamy says the response has been mixed.
A high number of countywide offices, a lesser number of township, and a disappointingly small number of school board candidates.
Perhaps the pledge is a necessary reminder in a year that's seen a string of alleged wrongdoings by public officials on the public's dime. Back in April, Lake Station Mayor Keith Sonderquist was indicted in federal court on allegations he stole public funds from the city's food pantry and his reelection campaign to spend gambling in Indiana and Michigan. In September, the Lake County Solid Waste Management District Board scrapped the contract of then Executive Director Jeff Langbin amid accusations he was dishonest about buying a designer purse for a female subordinate with a waste district credit card.
The best government is the government closest to the people, the government that affects them in their day-to-day lives. And we want to be sure that our employees and the communities that join want to be sure that their employees are serving the public in the best possible way.
This month, the commission will ask elected officials to next review a checklist of best practices and continue to try to coax community groups to take their oath. Officials with the Lake County Council say they are among parties who think the commission's pledge is a repeat of an oath officials have already taken. But even they seem to agree ethics are the one campaign element that should be uncontested.
I think I can take the liberty to say everyone on this body certainly believes in the premise and the concept of ethics. The council, at the very minimum, acknowledges the need to be more transparent and to ensure ethical behavior and practices.
Bellamy says an election summit set for next spring will provide further training for elected officials who sign the pledge. Well, a candidate who might have some familiarity with ethics on the job is Porter County Sheriff-elect Dave Reynolds. Steve Walsh spoke to him about getting another shot at the job after an absence of 8 years.
In most cases, elections mean new faces, though in Porter County it means the return of a familiar face. Former two-term Sheriff Dave Reynolds will be coming back after 8 years. He takes over from his own former Chief Deputy, David Lane, who served his own 2 terms. Dave Reynolds, welcome.
Thank you,
and
Steve.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So this was a really close race on election night. You were running against Mike Brickner, the Valparaiso police chief. What do you think turned the tide?
Well, I'm not really sure. I think we were confident that we were going to win. We didn't think it was going to be close, that close. I think looking at, I haven't really looked at the numbers, But looking at what had transpired throughout the whole county and the adjoining counties and LaPorte and Lake and even in Illinois, it just looked like it was a Republican perfect storm, if you will.
What made you, I mean, I remember you back 8 years ago when you were sheriff. What made you decide to want to come back for a second run?
Well, I have a good job now, but I was contacted by several of the officers, and they really expressed their desire for me to come back, and I did some soul searching, and I realized that I did miss it. You know, I missed being the sheriff. I missed what we had built when I went over there with Dave Lane and myself. And the more I thought about it, it just seemed it was something that would really, I really entertained to do. That, and after I made the decision, I realized it was the right decision. You know, I was excited that to have the opportunity and to start campaigning.
It's got to be unusual. I still haven't been able to run the numbers, but the notion of a sheriff serving 2 full terms, then going away for 2 full terms, and then coming back again, it's got to be incredibly unusual.
Well, in Porter County, it may have happened. I don't think it's happened in recent years, not that I know of. But I think it's a tribute to what we established in Dave Lane. Dave Lane was my chief, and of course he's the current sheriff, and we both faced term limits. But what we did was we maintained the same, I think, philosophy of how to run a department and how to serve the public. So apparently the public throughout the county made a statement that they didn't have any problem bringing me back.
Though 8 years, Porter County has changed pretty dramatically. This is a much larger county. I would say it's a much more suburban and urban county than it was when you were sheriff even 8 years ago. Are you prepared for that?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I've had the advantage. I've walked the county twice. I did it in the primary and I did it in the fall, so I saw firsthand the growth that you're speaking about. And it's unbelievable how much this county has grown, how many new subdivisions, big subdivisions, have grown north of 20, north of 30, south of 30, even north of and south of 6. I mean, throughout the whole county. And I think that's going to be one of the things that I have to address as far as manpower issues and some of the things that growth and some of the problems with the growth that we'll have to respond to.
Porter County is now as a larger part of Northwest Indiana than it used to be. Does that mean the Sheriff's Department is going to be working with surrounding counties more than it had been?
And I just think the growth, as you mentioned, is something that the governing bodies, probably outside the Sheriff's Department, need to address it too, because they approve. And rightfully so, they approve all the subdivisions, and it seems like they're more concerned about drainage than they are law enforcement. You know, and because law enforcement, you know, it comes with a price tag oftentimes, but my position is this: you don't want to build a $300,000-$400,000 home subdivisions and then and have them flood. Obviously,
right.
Nobody wants that, but they also don't want their homes to be broken into. So I think it's the sheriff's responsibility to really to fight for the increase in manpower that we need.
All right. Well, that's where we're going to leave it. Former sheriff, now sheriff-elect, David Reynolds. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Steve.
An increasing number of hospitals in the United States are making the switch from nonprofit to for-profit status. These conversions are controversial for many reasons. A new study examined what really happens when nonprofit hospitals become for-profit institutions. Catherine Dolph has more in this week's JAMA report.
Nonprofit hospitals are disappearing from the U.S. healthcare landscape. During the past decade, 237 nonprofit hospitals made the switch.
People worry that for-profit hospitals will skimp on care, that when a hospital becomes for-profit, it's going to avoid poor patients, it's going to avoid sick patients, it's going to avoid minority patients.
Dr. Ashish Jha and his colleagues from the Harvard School of Public Health matched those 237 hospitals to hospitals in the same region that didn't switch.
These nonprofit institutions, they were usually struggling when they got bought out or converted to for-profit. They just started getting run better. Their costs went down, their revenue stabilized. This conversion really does seem to be helpful to hospitals in terms of making them financially viable institutions. We're seeing a lot of conversions where hospitals that used to be nonprofit are switching to for-profit status. These changes are raising concerns among consumers, among policymakers, that maybe patients will be left worse off for it.
The study appears in JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association.
These hospitals don't seem to be avoiding poor patients, they don't seem to be avoiding minority patients. The quality of care that they provide seems quite comparable to everybody else in that community.
Patient outcomes weren't affected in hospitals making the switch, including the number of patients who died and those being readmitted.
Switching to for-profit status was associated with better financial health, but no detrimental effects on patient population, access, quality, or patient outcomes. Don't be distracted by questions like, is this a for-profit or nonprofit hospital? That's not what's important. It's about priorities around quality, and some organizations do it and others don't.
Catherine Dolph, The JAMA Report.
Study authors looked at these conversions for up to 3 years after they took place. A partnership between Chicago singers and LaPorte County Symphony Orchestra promises to entertain local audiences with thrice the fun. John Kane talks to conductor Philip Bauman on this week's Eye on the Arts.
Joining me for this edition of Eye on the Arts is Philip Bauman, Music Director of the LaPorte County Symphony Orchestra. And Phil, nice to have you back.
Great to be here, John.
So the LaPorte County Symphony Orchestra is doing what these days?
Well, we're getting ready to kick off our gala opening concert with the other three tenors.
The other three tenors.
The first were, of course, Domingo, Carreras, and Pavarotti.
Right.
But we're bringing from the Chicago area Warren Moulton, Franco Martorano, and Simon Lee, who are Korean descent, Italian descent, and American. And are coming.
A mixed bag.
Exactly.
Cultural diversity of tenors.
And they bring a great diversity of talent and repertoire to the program, and we're bringing them back. Great audience reception the first time they were with us, and they kept saying, when can you have these guys back? And we're delighted to do that this year. We're bringing them into a forum that's also going to have a chorus behind them, so we're delighted that my great friend Marion Boynes from Word Emerson is bringing her concert choir.
Oh, excellent.
So they're learning some great repertoire that they've never had a chance to dive into, and plus bringing their own flair and energy to the occasion. And so they'll be backing up the tenors on some numbers, doing some numbers on their own. And the concert's very entertaining. These gentlemen have a good rapport with the audience and talk and tell stories and have lots of jokes. And so I think that was a surprise the first time around, that the audience didn't realize how engaging the whole activity was going to be. So they were delighted with the familiar songs. And
right, because those tenor arias are they're classics.
Exactly.
Everybody loves them. You might not know you're going to love them.
No.
But then you recognize them.
They're going to be doing some things from opera, like from Carmen and Traviata and Bohème, but they're also some of the great Italian songs. And there will be a couple encores that we'll throw in there. They'll be very familiar to them, to the audience, because they'll go, oh yeah, like you said, I don't know what that one is, but yeah, oh shh.
I'm sorry.
That may make an appearance. That may make an appearance. But, and then part of this great concert too is that we're opening up for an opening dinner package, so people can come and dine, get to know the three tenors a little bit better. They're going to entertain us a bit, and then stay at your table and enjoy a great concert with this fantastic orchestra that we have in LaPorte.
And this is all at the it's called what is
Civic Auditorium.
Civic Auditorium.
In November 15th. Concert at 7:30, dinner at 6 o'clock, and it's going to be a greatly entertaining evening.
Okay, good. Well, good luck with it, and thank you for being here to tell us about it, and thank you for watching. We'll be back again next week with another edition of Eye on the Arts. Eye on the Arts is made possible in part by South Shore Arts, the Indiana Arts Commission, and the National Endowment for the Arts, a federal agency.
Twice a month, Lakeshore Report teams up with the Society of Innovators of Northwest Indiana to highlight some of the best forward-thinking projects and people the region has to offer. This week, Times reporter Mark Chase tells us about a project started in 2011 to take region visitors on an interactive journey through the Civil War. While Indiana is not home to historic battles, the stories of the men who fought and died in that war remain here on the South Shore.
The innovation is really creating a tourism and genealogical education trail around the last resting places of Northwest Indiana Civil War veterans. Hundreds of Civil War veterans are buried here in Northwest Indiana. Indiana had the second highest per capita involvement in the Civil War, and hundreds of those men came from the South Shores of Lake Michigan. The genesis of this whole thing was a Times project that we did in 2011 to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the Civil War's beginning, and we set out to retell the stories of the men from our area who served in the war. The innovation is really connecting all the different local burial sites and then using a website and mobile devices to retell the stories of the men who are buried here. The goal is to have QR codes at various spots of the cemeteries that we're participating with here, where you can actually scan the QR code with your mobile device and it'll take you to our website and the stories of the men who are buried in that particular cemetery.
Educational history, the wars in this country are very, very important tourist draws on the East Coast because of the battlefields, and we didn't have that link. And so by being able to team up with Mark and all of his research and all the hard work, we're offering opportunities for our visiting families. There's a whole new educational component to our visit that we didn't have previously.
And some of the project has been to restore, repair, or replace some of the old aging headstones that they used to have. The government issued marble markers. Marble doesn't hold up well in the industrial corridor that we work in. It's subject to a lot of erosion, and in many cases the inscriptions had worn off.
Destinations are built by people like Mark. It's really the hard work of those individuals, whether they're creating a Civil War memorial trail or they're building a gummy bear factory or the Holiday Star Theater. I mean, you know, our job is to tell the story. There's just a lot of people in the community who really make the story.
We really hope that they can come up close and personal with the stories of these men while visiting the last resting places. When you think about where these men are buried here at this cemetery, these are the spots where their families stood when they bid farewell to their loved ones. And these were also men who fought in the bloodiest conflict in American history. And to be able to come up close and personal with those stories and stand in the places where their loved ones stood, I think is a pretty powerful experience for some people.
For more information about the Society of Innovators, visit www.nwisoi.org. And don't forget, if you'd like to find out more about any of our programs, we have expanded versions of some stories, and certainly the stories themselves, on the web. You can get to our content there by going to lakeshorepublicmedia.org.
You can also reach us online with any thoughts, questions, or concerns. We're always looking for that information at TV feedback at lakeshorepublicmedia.org. We're also on Facebook at Lakeshore Report and Twitter at Lakeshore Report, and I like being there especially because we get a lot of feedback, a lot of interaction, especially this week with all the election coverage with the midterms going on. We were able to talk to some people with our hashtag NWIElect, and we got some good feedback. One of them was from a viewer named Lara Walters. She voted at Griffith Middle School, and she wrote to us, "Love the new iPad technology at the polls." That was a pretty cool tweet that we got from her on Tuesday. And also from another viewer, Paul S., whose handle is MoRacer84 in Hobart. He wrote, "Love the new iPad integration, best investment Lake County."
Oh, that's awesome. And I love hearing, but even more importantly, I think it's good to get that community feedback because, you know, Lake County Elections Board is going to want to hear that as well. It's nice that it helped ease everybody into the process.
Yeah, it was the first time for them, and it obviously went off without a hitch for a lot of the viewers who were using it. So I thought that was cool. And also talking to some of the candidates, I thought it was really neat that one of the candidates, Jamal Washington, wanted to wish his daughters a hey and hello.
Oh, nice. Well, hey, guys. Nice
his first
to see
order
you.
of business. So.
We want to thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you next week on Lakeshore Report.